Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Acha has joined us. So first and foremost, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Amir Rezai. I am an entrepreneur support portfolio manager at the Anzisha Prize program. I will be giving a brief background into Acha Leke, and he'll give himself if he wants to add anything additionally. But Acha is the co-founder of ALA, and he's a senior partner at McKinsey and Company and works at the Johannesburg office. He will be talking about the impact of COVID-19 on African economies, which is the PowerPoint presentation which we sent to you prior to the call. My colleague, Patrice Merindi, will be doing the French translation for Francophone fellows. The protocol or the procedure that we'll follow for this webinar session is Acha will speak first and introduce you and provide some insights and best practices regarding COVID-19. And then we will have a session where please can you send your questions to the chat group, and then I will collect them, and then I'll ask a fellow to ask Acha the question, and then he will respond. I will now hand over to Patrice Merindi, who will do the French translation, and then we will start with Acha bringing in his insights into COVID-19 and the impact of this on African economies. I hope that you enjoy the session, and once again, thank you for joining us.
Merci d'avoir rejoint notre session. Avant tout, il s'est présenté, lui c'est Amir, qui est un manager de portefeuille. Il a introduit la session. Notre session va porter sur l'impact du COVID-19 sur l'Afrique. Ça sera présenté par Acha Leke et moi, Patrice Merindi, le collègue d'Amir. Je serai en train de faire la traduction pour les francophones. Et pendant la session, s'il y a une question à poser, il faut juste l'écrire sur le chat et il y aura un moment où Amir va désigner les personnes qui peuvent poser leurs questions à haute voix. Okay, merci.
Sorry, guys, I didn't have audio. I just realized. Do you want me to start, or how do you want us to do this?
Okay. Acha, can you please start? I've given a brief introduction about you, and then you will just share your insights. Patrice will be translating. So when you speak, just give him a little bit of time to translate into French for our Francophone fellows. And then you can keep going. And then once you are done, then what we will do is open it up for Q&A. So please, can you get started as soon as you're ready?
All right. Can you guys see? I'm trying to share my slides. Can you guys see this? Can you guys all see it?
Est-ce que vous pouvez voir?
Yes. Okay. Yes. All right. I'm so sorry. I've never done this translation, but thanks guys for inviting me to speak to you. I think what would be most helpful, given we have translation, is probably go slide by slide, right? And so what we've been doing as McKinsey is trying to understand the impact of COVID on Africa, right? From an economic perspective, as you know, it's a health challenge, but it's also an economic challenge. So we're trying to understand what is the impact from an economic perspective.
Merci beaucoup. Pour la translation, nous allons commencer à partir slide par slide. Il travaille chez McKinsey et chez McKinsey, ils ont été en train de faire des études pour connaître l'impact du COVID-19 sur l'économie de l'Afrique.
I mean, first we have to start by recognizing that COVID is first a humanitarian crisis. It's affecting all of us, right? And now we're starting to see, and we can see the effect across Africa. And now governments and businesses and development partners are all really working together to try to help address it.
Avant tout, nous devons reconnaître que le COVID-19 est un problème humanitaire mondial et aujourd'hui, les gouvernements et différents parties prenantes sont en train de travailler pour trouver une solution pour le COVID-19.
Right. So 3 topics to talk about quickly, just where we are today, and I'll focus really on Africa. 2 is the impact of the crisis, and I'll show some of the modeling we did. And then talk about what government and the private sector and the development partners are doing to help address it.
Nous allons discuter sur 3 points principaux. Le premier, ça sera sur la pandémie du coronavirus, là où nous en sommes aujourd'hui. Je vais me focaliser sur l'Afrique. Deuxièmement, nous allons parler de comment ce COVID-19 est en train d'affecter l'économie africaine. Et troisièmement, il va nous montrer quelques modèles qu'ils ont pu faire. Et troisièmement, nous allons discuter sur quelques mesures potentielles pour atténuer les effets du COVID-19.
Okay. Just to start, again, it's a global crisis we have, and these numbers are, I think, of this morning, over 1 million cases, as you know, globally, and we're starting to see a lot more in Africa.
Juste pour commencer, vraiment, ça, c'est un problème qui est global et aujourd'hui, le nombre se compte en millions et nous sommes en train aussi de voir un nombre croissant en Afrique.
Yeah, and if you compare COVID to the flu, it definitely, there was big debates as to, how impactful or dangerous it is relative to the flu. It's very clearly now, people recognize that it's sort of, more dangerous than the flu.
Et si vous essayez de comparer ça à la grippe, il y a eu effectivement beaucoup de débats pour savoir l'impact ou bien lequel des deux est plus dangereux. Et aujourd'hui, on peut dire que le COVID-19 apparaît être plus dangereux que la grippe.
Right. Now let's come to Africa. So we now have about a bit over 9,000 cases in Africa this morning. You can see the distribution. A number of countries are over 1,000 cases, right? So Algeria, Egypt, South Africa. You have places like Cameroon already and Morocco that are between 500 and 1,000. But most countries in Africa today have experienced the crisis. Second thing is, if you compare to Europe, we were tracking ahead of Europe. We seem to be tracking below Europe now, which is a good sign. However, a lot of this is potentially due to not enough testing. We're not testing enough to really get a good sense for how bad the situation is in Africa.
Ça, ce sont les données d'aujourd'hui et nous avons environ 9000 cas en Afrique. Et si vous pouvez voir, il y a des pays qui ont plus de 1000 cas et nous avons des pays comme le Cameroun qui sont en train d'aller vers le 1000 cas. En général, tous les pays africains ont expérimenté les problèmes des coronavirus. Et si on essaie de comparer à l'Europe, on peut dire que l'Afrique a moins de cas, et ce qui est bon signe, mais aussi il y a un problème qui peut être lié aux tests qui sont faits en Afrique. Il se pourrait que, à cause du manque de tests, le nombre en Afrique soit un peu bas, mais et ça sera un peu difficile aussi de mesurer l'impact en Afrique dû à ça.
Right. So to study the impact, we did a few things. One is we came up with scenarios, and I'll explain the scenarios to you. We then looked at what is driving some of the impact and the 6 drivers that we use in the model. We modeled 5 countries that account for about 50% of Africa's GDP. As you can see, South Africa, Nigeria, Morocco, Kenya, and Angola, and we're continuing to model other countries. And then we extrapolated that to the whole continent.
Ce qui s'est passé est que pour mesurer l'impact en Afrique, nous avons commencé par différents scénarios. Ils vous laissent lire les scénarios. Puis après, ils ont essayé de voir quels sont les déterminants ou bien les conducteurs de l'expansion du corona. Ils ont considéré 5 pays qui sont l'Angola, le Kenya, le Maroc, Nigeria et l'Afrique du Sud. Et ils ont pu faire des projections sur toute l'Afrique en se basant sur ces pays.
For the scenarios, it was a 2x2, right? On one axis, looking at how the virus could spread globally, and on the other axis, look at how it could spread in Africa. You can imagine on the bottom left is what we call the contained scenario. This assumes that the US and Europe eventually are able to contain it, and China continues to contain it, and as Africa, we're able to contain it as well.
Le scénario faisait de 2 à 2. La première partie, c'est comment ça allait se faire en Afrique, mais aussi comment le virus allait se propager en Europe. Alors, dans ce scénario, il y a le deuxième qui s'est basé sur comment est-ce que l'Europe serait capable de contenir le virus, comment est-ce que la Chine ou les États-Unis seraient capables de contenir le virus, mais aussi comment l'Afrique serait capable de contenir ce virus.
And then for the drivers, turns out we talk about one crisis, but Africa is actually facing 3 crises. I remember, you may remember in 2016, we faced one crisis, which was the oil price. Today we're facing 3 crises. The first one is a global pandemic, and the way that translates is a disruption in supply chain for the goods the intermediary goods we're importing into Africa. Also lower demand for some of our exports, and then lower investments. We have an Africa pandemic when we restrict movements of people, that then has big impact on sectors like tourism, but also disruptions of way of working. Most of you are at home now. So that has a big impact on household expenditures, on business expenditures. And the third crisis is oil, right? Which affects big time the oil exporting countries like Nigeria and Angola, even though it's a positive impact for oil importers around the continent.
On peut dire que l'Afrique en général fait face à 3 challenges majeurs qui sont la pandémie globale et comment est-ce qu'elle impacte. Il y a des perturbations en ce qui concerne le chaîne d'approvisionnement global. Il y a des difficultés en ce qui concerne faire des transferts de biens entre l'Europe, l'Asie et avec l'Afrique. Il y a aussi une faible demande en termes du marché. Il y a peu d'exportation. Il y a aussi, en deuxième partie, il y a comment l'Afrique est affectée par la pandémie. Il y a le mouvement des gens qui est limité, et c'est là on voit directement tout ce qui concerne le tourisme et aussi la perturbation sur la façon dont les gens travaillent. Et enfin, il y a l'impact sur le pétrole. Il y a une réduction en ce qui concerne les revenus qui viennent du pétrole. Bon, bien qu'ici, il peut y avoir ça peut être une bonne nouvelle pour des pays comme le Nigeria.
Une bonne nouvelle pour les pays importateurs de pétrole.
OK, une bonne nouvelle pour les pays importateurs de pétrole comme le Nigeria.
All right. So this is the result of the scenario modeling, right? So there's only one scenario under which we think growth will stay positive in Africa. You can see scenario 1, 0.4%. On every other scenario, we think Africa is going to go into recession. And scenario 1 is looking more and more unlikely today, right? So, I'm pretty convinced that Africa as a continent is going to go into a recession. This is just for 2020. Now, we have not modeled all the fiscal stimulus packages that our governments are announcing. We've not modeled the impact of currency devaluations on this. We've not modeled the downgrade of South Africa. This is sort of base case. We believe under, most scenarios, Africa, unfortunately, is going to experience a recession this year.
Scenario 4. OK. En ce qui concerne les différents scénarios, il n'y a que le scénario numéro 1 où l'Afrique expérimente une valeur positive. C'est peu probable que ce scénario puisse arriver, mais en parlant du scénario 4 où il y a une forte réduction en Afrique, et nous pouvons dire que c'est ce qui est probable d'arriver, qui est probable pour les pays africains.
And what's driving, like I said, there were 3 drivers for these numbers. About half of the losses are driven by the African pandemic. So this is the reduction in household expenditure and business expenditure. About 30% of the losses is driven by the global pandemic, which is the supply chain disruptions and the lower demand for our exports. And about 20% of the losses are driven by oil, just to give you a sense.
En ce qui concerne les conducteurs de cette perte, le premier conducteur, c'est la pandémie en Afrique, comment elle affecte l'Afrique. Et là, nous voyons directement la réduction dans les achats du ménage, la réduction dans les achats des business. Aussi, il y a 30% qui est dû à l'effet de la pandémie sur le plan global. Et là, nous voyons la réduction dans la chaîne d'approvisionnement et à 20% se manifeste grâce à la réduction du prix du pétrole, du demande du prix du pétrole.
And we have it by country. I don't need to go through, I'll go very quickly. Nigeria, under any scenario for us, is going to go into recession. And about 70% of this is driven by oil.
Ici, nous avons même fait par pays. Il ne va pas discuter sur tous les pays, mais ici, c'est l'exemple du Nigeria. Et ici, la perte qui sera manifestée dans le Nigeria sera conduite par le problème lié au prix du pétrole.
South Africa, same. Under every scenario, South Africa is going to be in a recession. And this, again, does not include the downgrade. So things that we're modeling the downgrade as we speak. I have a call right after this with the modelers because it's going to be worse than this, right? So under this scenario, this, again, most of it is driven by the reduction in household expenditure and business expenditure, and also in the reduction of our exports. Because given South Africa is a big sort of manufacturing hub for Africa.
Pour l'Afrique du Sud, tous les scénarios encore ont montré qu'il y a une récession. Et cela sera dû du fait qu'il y aura une réduction dans les achats des ménages, mais aussi en ce qui concerne les business. Mais aussi, l'Afrique du Sud est un pays qui exporte beaucoup. Il sera aussi affecté dû à la réduction des exportations.
For Kenya, we have under two scenarios, we think growth will be positive still, right? Even though the second scenario is barely positive. And the other two scenarios, we see it in a recession. This Kenya is driven by it's fairly driven board, right? So part of it is the consumer spend, as you can expect. Part of it is a reduction in exports, like flour exports. Part of it is reduction of things like tourism.
Pour le Kenya, il y a deux scénarios qui ont montré une croissance positive de l'économie, mais aussi deux autres qui ont montré qu'il y aura une récession. Avec le Kenya, c'est modéré. C'est dû soit à la réduction, par exemple, dans le tourisme, à la réduction des achats du ménage, et c'est aussi dû à tout ce qui concerne la réduction dans les achats des business. Et l'exportation, par exemple, c'est des fleurs.
Right. So let's talk about what players are doing, and then let's open it up to Q&A. I think what's more relevant is Q&A. The challenge in Africa, a lot of governments are talking about doing fiscal stimulus packages and getting money to people who have lost jobs. Africa is unique in a number of ways.
Beaucoup de pays sont en train de prendre différentes stratégies, par exemple, différentes difficultés, par exemple, une limitation dans les capacités fiscales. Mais en Afrique, c'est un peu différent. Le scénario est un peu différent.
So 4 things. One is, we don't have the fiscal space. Like I said, we don't have $2 trillion to pump into our economy like the US was able to do because we have lower revenues for our governments, and a lot of the revenue we use is to go pay our debt, 22%. And so we need support from players like, the development partners to help us with that. Secondly, our economies are very informal, right? And so 80% of the jobs, as you well know, are created by the SME sector. So whatever packages we put together really has to make sure that it reaches SMEs, even more so than it reaches large companies. And also that it reaches the informal sector. The informal sector is, over half of many of our economies. the demographics of our people, right? A lot of them are in the cities, but they also live in slums. And so, quarantine methods are very difficult, as we're seeing now already in slums. And then, some of the measures we're taking, like closing schools, it's been shown by data shows that when you close schools, girls, it's harder for girls to come back to school. And so there's some implications of some of these measures, long-term implications that we need to think about. And then finally, our healthcare system is fragile on a good day, right? We don't have as many healthcare professionals. We don't have as many hospitals and beds. And so how do we quickly expand the healthcare system to be able to cater for this crisis is something that we need to take into consideration as well.
En ce qui concerne la différence en Afrique, il y a d'abord sur le plan fiscal. L'Afrique n'a pas vraiment l'espace fiscal qu'ils font. Ils ne peuvent pas faire comme les États-Unis, investir par exemple 3 milliards de dollars pour aider la population. C'est difficile pour les pays africains. Il faut aussi voir le point que le secteur informel en Afrique va au-delà de 50% de l'économie. Alors, ce sera un peu difficile pour les pays, pour les gouvernements de pouvoir revitaliser ou bien améliorer l'économie. Il faut aussi voir que, en ce qui concerne la démographie, il y a plusieurs personnes vivent en ville et ils sont en train de vivre dans des banlieues. Alors, ça rend même difficile de faire ce qui concerne le fait que les gens doivent rester dans leur maison, ça devient difficile. Et aussi, les écoles sont fermées et nous savons qu'il y a des difficultés pour les filles de rentrer au cours et ça sera peut-être difficile pour eux après la réouverture des écoles qu'ils puissent encore accéder à l'éducation. Enfin, il y a des problèmes en ce qui concerne le système sanitaire africain. L'Afrique n'a pas vraiment des hôpitaux qui sont capables de pallier, à répondre positivement en ce qui concerne les problèmes liés à la pandémie.
So let's talk just quickly about what different stakeholders are doing, and then we can have a conversation. Governments are doing 5 things, and we're helping many governments across Africa address some of these. One is setting up what we call a national nerve center. So at the center, a group of people who are really responsible for dealing with this crisis, right? From an operationalization perspective, how to track and monitor, how to communicate with the people, and how to make sure everything is still running effectively. So that's the first thing they're doing. The second is dealing with the health crisis, right? How do you contain the epidemic? When to lock down, how to lock down, how fast to lock down, all these questions are things they're dealing with, but also trying to understand how bad could this epidemic be, because that has an impact for, what you need in terms of, how many ventilators do you need in the country, how many, test kits do you need, how many masks do you need, and we're helping actually many countries on the whole continent size this. We have an epidemiological model that will help to size this, and then the health ecosystem, how many beds do we need? Do we have the hospitals in place? Do we have the healthcare workers? So that's one area they're focusing on. The second is food supply. As you do these lockdowns, you still need to make sure people can eat and people have access to food, right? So how do you secure, especially the essential products, but how do you make sure the price is right? Because now what are you seeing in many countries, prices are increasing for some of these products. So how do you do that? And you track and monitor while keeping the essential services open, right? Health, education, telecoms, utilities, and all of that. The third thing is vulnerable. How do you support people, right? So the big issue here is a lot of people businesses are going to go out of business, and the people are going to lose jobs, right? I'm sure it's affecting some of your businesses as well. So the big question is, what measures do you put in place to actually support these businesses and help them? And it's less about supporting businesses, it's more about supporting the employees to make sure they don't lose their jobs, right? So that's a bit the mindset when they're creating these programs. And second is the most vulnerable populations. How do you reach them? It's going to be mostly digital. And how do you provide support to them? Do you give them cash? Do you give them food? And countries are doing it differently, but they're at least thinking about how do I even get to reach them and provide them with what they need. And the fourth is the economy, right? So running scenarios about how big of a hole am I going to have in my budget? How do I fill that hole? And there's a lot of players who are coming in to help here with the development partners, right? The $100 billion package we're asking the development partners for. What kind of stimulus packages do you need to keep the economy alive? And then as you start to think about recovery as well, start to prepare now for, we're going to recover at some point, right? So how do we make sure that we recover stronger over time? So that's what governments are, I think, are focusing on.
Ici, ce sont les 5 éléments sur lesquels les gouvernements sont en train de se focaliser. Bien sûr, après, c'est ça, vous pouvez maintenant poser vos questions. La première chose, c'est que les gouvernements se focalisent sur un centre national. Ces gens sont considérés comme les personnes qui réfléchissent sur ce qu'il faut faire, comment faire que toutes les choses puissent marcher ensemble. Alors, il y a cette première partie. Il y a aussi la deuxième partie, ça concerne le point sanitaire. Le premier point, c'est comment contenir l'épidémie, quelles sont les mesures qui sont prises en place. Il y a certaines réductions qui se mettent en place. Le nombre de masques qu'il y a dans le pays, aussi en ce qui concerne les diagnostics, les tests pour isoler les patients. Après, il y a aussi l'écosystème. Ici, en écosystème sanitaire, il faut voir tout ce qui concerne les hôpitaux, les masques et les ventilateurs, mais aussi l'équipe des médecins qui sont là. Il y a aussi la troisième chose sur laquelle le gouvernement se focalise, c'est assurer qu'il n'y ait pas de manque en ce qui concerne la nourriture, parce que les gens doivent toujours manger, et s'assurer aussi que le prix de cette nourriture ne puisse pas monter, comme ça se voit dans certains pays, et aussi comment maintenir l'accès à certains éléments essentiels comme les utilités ou bien certains, pour tout ce qui concerne les réseaux téléphoniques. Quatrièmement, le gouvernement se concentre sur la protection des travail. Il y a beaucoup de gens, surtout les personnes, il y a beaucoup de gens qui peuvent facilement perdre leur travail dû à ce qui dû à la pandémie. Alors, le gouvernement essaie de se concentrer pour limiter les pertes de travail, mais aussi y réfléchir sur comment aider les populations vulnérables. Est-ce que ça va se faire par la technologie, ou bien est-ce qu'il faut leur donner de l'argent, ou bien il faut leur donner la nourriture? Donc, il y a beaucoup de choses sur lesquelles les gouvernements sont en train de réfléchir sur ça. Enfin, les gouvernements aussi réfléchissent sur l'économie. Ici, la question, c'est de se poser comment est-ce qu'on peut maintenir une économie stable et durable dans cette situation. Et aussi, après que l'épidémie est passée, quels sont les mécanismes que les gouvernements mettent en place pour la période de convalescence?
If we look at what private sectors, and I guess some of these things it depends on the scale of your business, you should be looking at. All right, one is, having a nerve center, so having a small group of people who are really responsible for understanding how this crisis is going to unfold and manage. And the first thing is managing your employees, making sure your employees are safe, they're doing well, knowing how they're doing, providing them support, as and when needed. So that's the first thing. That's the workforce protection. How do you protect them, and making sure they, if they need to continue to operate, they do so in a very safe manner, right? Third is, supply chain. Again, I don't know where your products are coming from, but how do you stabilize the supply chain? How is your supply chain going to be affected? Right, we find that some of our clients in China, as they're reopening their factories, the challenge they have is part of the supply chain is coming from Italy, right? So that's a problem. So really, how do you think about rethinking through your supply chain and understand, what are the risks to it today, and how do you get around that? Fourth, of course, is your customers, right? How do you engage with them? Again, if you're working in a remote way, there are different ways, right? We're all working remotely as well now, and a number of our projects are still going on. There's a lot you can do remotely. You were all learning how to do it, but figuring out what you can do remotely to sort of sustain your business. Fifth, of course, is stress testing your financials, understanding, how much cash you have, under different scenarios, how much cash are you going to have, when are you going to need to raise money, what are you going to do to conserve cash? Cash is king. Like somebody said, people, for individuals, toilet roll is what people are hanging on to. For businesses, cash is what you need to hang on to, right? To really think through how you preserve cash. And then F, this is mainly, I think we think more for larger companies who have a role to play in society, is how do you help, especially in Africa, how do you help the governments? The governments on their own can't really address this. So I think the larger companies and the business associations have a role to play, really step up and really help government address this crisis?
Maintenant, on va parler un peu du secteur privé dans lequel vous vous retrouvez. La première des choses, bien sûr, c'est qu'il y a encore une équipe qui pense et réfléchit sur les mécanismes qui doivent être mis en place pour survivre cette épidémie. La deuxième chose, c'est comment les gens qui travaillent pour vous, les travailleurs, comment est-ce qu'ils peuvent continuer à travailler, comment est-ce qu'ils peuvent travailler sans ne pas se mettre en danger en ce qui concerne la maladie. Après, il faut réfléchir aussi sur la chaîne d'approvisionnement, comment stabiliser cette chaîne d'approvisionnement. Il a donné un exemple que il y a certaines industries qui ont réouvert en Chine, mais alors la chaîne d'approvisionnement peut-être passe par l'Italie. Alors, la question, c'est comment on doit faire dans ce genre de situation. Après, il a parlé du client, l'engagement avec le client. Aujourd'hui, bien sûr, les clients sont confinés, ne peuvent pas sortir. Alors, quels sont les mécanismes qui sont mis en place pour atteindre et engager les différents clients? Après, tout ce qui concerne les problèmes financiers, il faut être capable de réfléchir sur comment est-ce que les finances de votre société est en train d'être affectées. Quelle est la quantité de cash que vous avez directement pour pallier aux problèmes dans votre entreprise? Et bien sûr, enfin, le support du gouvernement. Comment est-ce que les gouvernements sont en train de réfléchir sur comment est-ce qu'ils peuvent apporter leur soutien au secteur privé afin qu'ils puissent parvenir à survivre cet épisode.
And then finally, the development partners are also stepping up to help significantly, right? So, you know, we're the big package is a $100 billion package that we're hopefully going to get approved in terms of getting them to at least waive or delay interest payments. So basically, governments in Africa all have to pay $44 billion in interest payments to all of the development partners for loans they've gotten in the past, right? This year alone. So we're trying to make sure that that actually gets waived or delayed at a minimum. In addition to that, there are a number of things the development partners are helping us with. They're helping us figure out how to provide liquidity to the private sector, right? So how do you provide, in some cases, interest-free loans to businesses so you can get those loans, but how do you make sure you use those loans not, you know, to pay off suppliers in general, but also to pay your staff, right? So you can, because all we want to do is make sure we can maintain jobs and maintain staff. You know, solidarity funds are being set up in different countries. South Africa has set one up, other countries in Nigeria is doing the same. But we're also thinking about, is there room for a Pan-African solidarity fund that will really, you know, gather resources from everybody around the world to really help with Africa. There's a big talk about, you know, do we go and have a big ask of China? Say, China, you need to, you know, you guys effectively created this. Can you help us? Right? What is the big ask we're going to have of China? And then the number of different players who are coming together, the development partners. There's a set of African leaders in both the public and the private sector that have also come together and said, look, you know, how do we really make sure every country is trying to resolve their own situation, but how do we make sure we have a Pan-African response to this crisis, and we're part of that, right? So that's also so the good news is we're also getting development partners to step up and help. But the message we have in the report we published last week, which you may have received, is this is not enough, right? Across the board, we all need to step up and do much more, because this is going to be, we think, a really deep crisis for the continent, and we all need to step up and do a lot more to help address it.
Okay. Il y a aussi les partenaires de développement qui sont en train d'apporter leur soutien par différents moyens. Il y a un budget d'à peu près 100 milliards de dollars qui attendent d'être approuvés. Il y a aussi les pays africains, il y a aussi une demande pour que à peu près 44 milliards de dettes d'intérêt que les pays africains doivent payer, où il y a une demande où on demande que ça puisse être annulé, ou bien justement, ou bien chercher un moyen de le retarder. À part ça, il y a aussi des fonds de solidarité qui ont été faits dans différents pays, par exemple ici en Afrique du Sud ou bien même au Nigeria. Mais aussi, les pays africains sont en train de chercher une solution panafricaine de solidarité sur comment lever des fonds pour aider les différents pays africains. Enfin, bien sûr qu'il y a aussi avec le rapport qu'ils ont écrit, ils ont dit que bien sûr que tout ceci est là, mais ce n'est pas suffisant. Il faut encore que les gens puissent se mettre ensemble et faire encore beaucoup plus d'efforts pour faire en sorte que cette crise économique ne puisse pas être quelque chose d'irréversible pour l'Afrique.
All right, so I mean, let me stop there, and I'm happy to take questions.
OK, il va stopper par ici et il serait content de prendre des questions.
Thank you very much, Acha and Patrice. So there's going to be 3 questions initially asked. I please ask all the fellows. You'll have a chance to ask 1 question depending on the time left, but please just prioritize it into 1 question and not multiple questions so that you allow Acha and Patrice to answer the question. So the first 3 questions or questioners, one is Mankoba, then it's from Gabriel, and then Khalib. Can we please start with Mankoba, please?
All right. Sorry about that. Hi, Acha. Thanks for taking the time to do this. I just had a question around the economic reform that Minister Mboweni spoke about specifically for South Africa as a result of the downgrade, that it gave them space to sort of implement reforms that weren't possible before. Do you have any ideas of what that might look like, just to help us identify some opportunities that might lie in that space? Thank you.
Okay, là, juste poser une question sur, en ce qui concerne la réforme qui a été mise en place par le ministre de l'économie ici en Afrique du Sud. Il aimerait juste avoir des idées sur l'impact qui peut avoir lieu et quel comportement il peut prendre en ce qui concerne cette réforme.
So I mean, it hasn't been defined yet, right? So we're all waiting to see, what they're going to come up with, right? But like somebody once said, you should never waste a good crisis. There are a number of tough decisions that South Africa has had to take for a while, whether it's, how to bring in more private sector to help operate some of these state-owned enterprises. Some of the tough decisions you have to do on wages, right? So you have to do an ESCOM, right? So a lot of us are hoping that this would actually be the impetus for the country to take some of these tough decisions, right? And I think you're doing the right thing, which is as it comes out and it's going to come out, it has to come out soon. It's definitely going to create an opportunity for different businesses, right? So I'd encourage you all, as countries put out the stimulus packages, think through one way, how does that stimulus packages help you, right? Protect your business, but also think through what business opportunities does it create for you, right? We're seeing in South Africa today, everybody's becoming a PPE manufacturer because everybody wants to say, look, we can sell masks to the country, right? So really thinking through not just how to protect your business, but how can this be a business opportunity for you would be the way to look at it.
All right, great. Thank you.
Il a dit que, en fait, la réforme n'a pas encore été prononcée, mais il explique que, bien sûr, il ne faut pas attendre que ces réformes soient prononcées. Vous, en tant qu'entrepreneur, il faut réfléchir sur comment prendre, ne pas seulement songer sur le fait comment ça affecte votre business, mais il faut chercher à voir l'opportunité qui existe dans ce qui se passe. Et il a donné l'exemple que, par exemple, aujourd'hui, beaucoup d'entrepreneurs veulent se lancer dans la production de masques qui constitue une opportunité pour les différents entrepreneurs.
Thank you very much. Gabriel, can you please ask your question and then followed by Caleb? But just before you ask, Gabriel, Acha, are you comfortable with answering 3 questions per time, or would you like it to be 1 or 2?
I'm happy to take it at a time. We need to, let's get it. Take it at a time.
Okay, perfect. Gabriel, please ask your question.
Gabriel, tu peux demander ta question. Tu peux poser ta question.
You're muted. She's on mute, Gabriel. Okay. Now you're unmuted, but it's hard to hear you.
Gabriel, tu peux parler? Oh.
Il parle, non, on l'entend pas. Maybe he should type his question. Should we go to the next one while he types his question?
Gabriel, est-ce que tu peux écrire ta question parce qu'on n'arrive pas à t'entendre.
So I do have his question, Acha. His question he asked was, did you think about the possibility of a disease such as COVID-19 when you were writing your book?
Right. So should we take the third question?
Yes, the third question is from Caleb. Caleb, please, can you ask your question?
Okay, so hello, Acha. Please, based on your metric presented, you know, as you said from your presentation, most businesses here in Africa, our business chain or operational chain depends on elsewhere. And so now with most of the companies who seem to have been producing some of the stuff for us, who are now shifting to producing PPEs from Asia, America, Europe, when do you think the average performing SMEs in Africa will pick up after this pandemic?
En fait, juste qu'il pose la question pour savoir concernant le fait que les chaînes d'approvisionnement en Afrique a beaucoup de problèmes et beaucoup de petites entreprises en Afrique dépendent de ça. Alors, il voudrait savoir ce que M. Acha en pense.
Yes, I mean, so for the first question, no, I did not think of such a pandemic when I was writing my book. I think very few people, even though many of us had watched Bill Gates' TED Talk, nobody told me 2 months ago that I would be stranded in my house in Johannesburg and not able to leave, and it's been 10 days now. I would have not believed it, right? So no, I didn't think about it. Having said that, I think this is a big lesson for the world, but also for Africa, right? And we need to, I think, things will change fundamentally going forward, right? You know, in some ways for the better, right? I think a lot of how we work and how we operate. I, for one, travel every single week. Now I'm doing Zoom calls with my clients all over Africa, right? Clients I never thought would do Zoom calls. So I think it's definitely going to change how we operate. It's also going to change how we behave, right, going forward. On the second question on SMEs, you know, my big fear, that is the segment that is going to be hit the most on the continent. All of you, I think you're probably the segment that is the most vulnerable, right? And so do I know when things will pick up? We don't know. There's talk about, is it a V-shaped recovery, a U-shaped recovery, a W-shaped recovery, an L-shaped? I think we all agree it's probably not going to be a V-shape. It's going to take long. And so the question for all of you, I think, is really to think through, like I said, what would it take? How long can your business survive, right? And what packages are there in place for, well, two or three things. One is how long can your business survive, right? And then, you know, how can you manage your costs such that you survive the longest? Two is then, how do you take advantage of some of these packages that governments are putting in place, these business rescue packages for SMEs? So being very aware of all of them that exist and how do you apply for it and how do you make sure you get it? For me, that's the second. And third is then really thinking through, you know, in every such crisis, there's an opportunity, right? So really thinking through for your business model, what is the opportunity that this crisis creates for you, and how do you sort of take advantage of that opportunity?
En ce qui concerne le livre, ok, pendant qu'il écrivait le livre, il n'avait pas pensé à ça, sinon il aurait pris des dispositions nécessaires. Il y a aussi une réponse où il a dit que non, c'est une grande leçon pour l'Afrique et il y aura beaucoup de changements fondamentaux qui vont se faire et il espère que ça sera pour les meilleurs. Enfin, il a dit que bien sûr, les petites et moyennes entreprises sont les plus vulnérables en temps de crise, mais il a donné 3 points essentiels sur lesquels il faut penser. Le premier point, c'est réfléchir pendant combien de temps ton entreprise peut tenir en place et aussi quels sont les mécanismes à mettre en place en termes des dépenses pour que ton entreprise puisse durer le plus longtemps. Aussi, il a montré qu'il faut réfléchir sur comment prendre avantage des différentes opportunités que les gouvernements sont en train d'offrir aux petites et moyennes entreprises. Et enfin, il a dit que chaque crise constitue aussi une opportunité pour les gens. Alors, vous aussi, en tant que jeune entrepreneur, il faut revoir votre modèle de business et voir comment vous pouvez saisir l'opportunité que cette crise offre.
Thank you. George, you had a question. Please ask your question. And if we do have any time, the last question is from Isaac. But let's see how long it takes Patrice and Acha to answer George's question.
Okay, thanks, Acha, for the beautiful presentation. My question is, you mentioned that SMEs are most affected, but most of them are still informal. So even government stimulus packages, whether from the central banks or governments, because of informality, they might not be able to reach them. So you mentioned something about a liquidity support fund, but how might that actually work to ensure that most of these informal SMEs get the support they actually need to actually survive? That's my question.
Ok, la question, il pose la question sur le point que M. Acha a soulevé sur le fait que les petites et moyennes entreprises seront les plus touchées et ils sont les plus vulnérables en ce qui concerne la crise. Il dit que la plupart de vos entreprises sont informelles, alors ça devient difficile pour eux d'accéder aux différentes options ou soutien que le gouvernement sont en train d'offrir. Alors, il aimerait savoir comment est-ce que M. Acha pourrait lui conseiller en tant qu'un jeune entrepreneur qui a un business informel pourrait se positionner dans ce cas.
I mean, I think we have some time, right? So should we take Isaac's question and I can answer both?
Okay, that works well. Isaac, please also ask your question.
Okay. All right. Yeah, first of all, thank you, Acha, for making the time to do this, and thank you, the guys from Anzisha, Amir and Takosa, thank you for setting this up. My question is, right now in the US, we are seeing some companies actually making some money through this crisis, and you've already kind of mentioned this. So, companies like Slack, Zoom, which we're using right now, but also Amazon. So I'm just wondering if you think there are any sectors or any businesses in Africa that can actually thrive through this crisis.
Ok, il a dit qu'il y a certains, comme M. Acha l'a mentionné, qu'il y a certaines entreprises aux États-Unis qui parviennent à gagner beaucoup d'argent avec cette crise qui se passe. Il donne l'exemple de Zoom ou bien Amazon. Alors, il est en train de demander un conseil à Acha sur quelle entreprise ou bien quel secteur en Afrique pourrait être aussi profitable pendant cette crise.
Yeah, so on the informality, that is actually a problem, right? So yes, the packages would typically go for the formal sector. What governments are doing, and you saw that even in Ghana already, right? They're saying, we're going to give these tax breaks, but by the way, if you register as a tax, even if you haven't paid, if you're informal, if you register, then you can also have access to it, right? So I think they're using this opportunity to try to get a lot of informal SMEs to actually come into the formal sector, right? By saying we're gonna extend this package to some of the companies in the formal sector, but as long as you register with the tax authority, right? So now we can have you in the formal sector. So governments are also thinking of how do you leverage a crisis to benefit? How do you leverage a crisis to actually, try to shift companies from the informal sector to the formal sector? So I would argue if you guys want to access it, it's actually worth registering, right? As a formal registering, so that you have access to these packages. Because I agree, most of the packages you'll get will, just inherently the way they're structured, they'll have to go to the formal sector. Right now, on the informal side, I think the way the governments we're talking to are looking to reach it is more through the individual type packages for vulnerable populations. Right, it's hard to put packages together for the informal business sector. So if you stay informal, I think the only way you really access something is whatever packages they have in place for vulnerable populations.
En ce qui concerne les entrepreneurs dans les secteurs informels, bien sûr que c'est un sérieux problème, la plupart des soutiens que les gouvernements vont donner vont se diriger vers les petites et moyennes entreprises dans les secteurs informels, pardon. Et il a donné l'exemple du Ghana où le gouvernement a donné une condition que si tu es dans le secteur informel et tu aimerais avoir accès aux différents soutiens que le gouvernement donne, il faut t'enregistrer. Donc, il dit que les gouvernements aussi vont prendre cette opportunité pour pousser beaucoup des petites et moyennes entreprises d'entrer dans le secteur formel et s'enregistrer. Alors, le conseil qu'il donne, c'est que toutes les petites et moyennes entreprises dans le secteur informel devraient tout faire pour s'enregistrer et entrer dans le secteur formel pour avoir accès à ces différents soutiens qui sont offerts.
Bah, je ne dirais pas que vous devrez tout faire pour vous enregistrer. Je dirais, si ça vous intéresse de recevoir ce genre de support, il faudrait donc aller vous enregistrer. Donc, c'est à vous de faire le choix. And then, Isaac, to your question, I think, yes, there are definitely some sectors that are benefiting from it most. When we actually studied that a bit on the continent, the sectors that are most affected, as you can imagine, is tourism, right? Your sector, right? So tourism is most affected. Oil and gas in many of our countries, hugely affected. Consumer, it's interesting because they saw a spike at the beginning, right? Because people were going on, making sure they had to buy everything they needed. But if this lasts long, they're going to be affected. The sectors that are less affected, actually potentially positively affected. Telecoms, right? So some of our telecom operators, when we looked at, and I'm serving, I just had a call with one of them yesterday. They're actually starting to see, especially on the data traffic exploding, right? Voice traffic has reduced a bit, but data traffic is exploding. So they want to make sure that they have the network to sustain this, and they think that's going to continue, right? As we all work on Zoom and we work remotely. Healthcare, right? So, and healthcare supplies, right? So anybody who's going to sell masks, hand sanitizers, all of those things. I think somebody mentioned as well, if you start to think about what are the things we're importing from China, and as those export markets close, what can you, really quickly manufacture locally, right? So I think that is a sector again, and that may actually be here to stay, because I think one of the long-term impacts of the crisis is definitely going to have to be much more of the supply chain being brought back to be closer. Right, people are not going to have to continue to rely on China because they say this happens again. So what are the supply chains? So I think if I were you guys thinking through what are some of these elements that we were importing that you think will be critical, and people will say, look, governments will actually potentially push to manufacture locally. Pharmaceuticals is one of them, right? The government is going to say, you know what? Yeah, many of the goods from India tended to be much cheaper than what we produce locally. But they're going to say, like, we cannot continue to rely on India because right now, for example, these markets have shut down their exports, so we can have access to these APIs, right? So I think thinking through what are those sectors for which manufacturing locally is going to be important. So that's one angle. And the last thing I'll end up on, which is how is our behavior going to change? And then what opportunities does that create? So for example, even if things open up today, I'm not sure you're going to get on a plane flying from, Kampala to Lagos if you don't know if the person next to you is positive or not, right? So there'll be a lot of apps to check status, apps to figure out, if they are, apps to let people, get on a plane, apps to let people, go to work. That there's a lot of technology is going to play quite a big role in helping us, even more so as we try to resolve this crisis and get back to normal life until there's a virus, until there's a vaccine. So thinking through what are those opportunities for you guys would be something to look at.
OK, il a commencé par montrer les secteurs qui sont vraiment les plus touchés. Il a parlé du tourisme, il est vraiment touché. Il y a aussi le secteur du pétrole. Il a montré qu'au début, il y avait une forte consommation, mais plus la pandémie augmentait, il y avait une réduction dans la consommation. Mais il a montré aussi qu'il y a certains secteurs qui sont en train de faire des gros bénéfices, comme la télécommunication. Il y a eu une augmentation dans la consommation des bandes de données en ce qui concerne l'Internet. Il a aussi spécifié aussi qu'en ce qui concerne les appels, la consommation en appel normal, il y a eu une petite réduction. Il a aussi montré qu'il y aurait aussi une forte croissance à ce qui concerne tous les produits qui sont achetés, par exemple, en Chine ou bien dans les différents pays, ça serait très important que vous, en tant qu'entrepreneur, puissiez réfléchir sur comment voir ces opportunités, les implémenter. Il a parlé, par exemple, des dépôts pharmaceutiques, comment tout ce qui concerne des compagnies pharmaceutiques. Il a aussi montré que dans les secteurs sanitaires, il y aura aussi des opportunités. Il y a des opportunités en ce qui concerne la fabrication des masques ou bien des gels de main pour lutter contre les virus. Enfin, il a aussi dit que, bien sûr, même si la pandémie finissait aujourd'hui, les gens ne peuvent pas voyager et sans savoir l'état sanitaire ou bien l'état dans lequel la personne qui est assise à côté de toi peut se retrouver. Alors, il pense que ça serait important, il faut réfléchir sur comment mettre des applications en place qui peuvent permettre la détection la détection de la maladie chez certaines personnes.
Acha, do you have time for 2 more questions?
I have a hard stop at past. I think I have another. What do I have? I mean, yeah, if it's quick, because I really have a.
Okay, so let's take one because I know Fadwa has been looking to ask a question. So Fadwa, please do ask a question.
Bonjour, est-ce que vous m'écoutez?
Oui, on vous écoute.
Ok, alors ma question était que puisque nous sommes dans le secteur de la mode éco-responsable et socialement responsable, et je m'attends à que cette responsabilité puisse avoir son impact puisque la consommation ou les habitudes de consommation ils vont changer, je ne sais pas pour l'Afrique, mais en tous les cas, est-ce que ça prendra énormément de temps pour que notre activité puisse reprendre parce qu'on a mis des milliers d'euros sur une exposition et on ne sait pas à quoi s'attendre. On ne sait pas est-ce que nos clients vont revenir, est-ce que nous pourrons faire les ventes habituelles que nous faisons. Merci.
She's in the fashion sector. She would like to know that if for those people who are in the fashion sector, and you said about the customer behavior and how it's going to change, she would like to know what will happen after the pandemic. How is she going to be, are they going to be affected for people to resume to the normal way of buying the products? And she said that they had an exposition that they've already prepared, and she's wondering, they've put a lot of money, and she's wondering if people will still come to buy and see the exposition, and she wants to know how long will it take for people in that sector to gain the customers.
I mean, unfortunately, I really think this crisis could potentially take some time, right? I think best case people are looking at a recovery, call it June, July, August. Again, that's in the best case scenario, right? And the question is also when things start to recover, what gets opened first, right? So, it's not like, overnight we're going to open the entire economy, right? So the question is, what are the sectors that get reopened fast? And it's going to be a combination, because you can imagine once you reopen, and you don't want people, you want to make sure it's not affected. You want to make sure it's a sector that has a big impact on the economy, but also that you're sure that it's not, the virus is not in that sector, right? And then that's the first sector reopen, and then gradually reopen other sectors, just like parts of the economy, parts of the country. You want to reopen parts of the country, but make sure that is virus-free and that there's no risk of it being reinfected as you reopen it. So all this to say, I think you guys need to brace yourself for something that, could last a while, unfortunately, right? And I know, like I said, you guys are potentially the most vulnerable parts of the economy when it comes to this. But, if I were you, I would definitely look at, something not starting back fully before September, right, roughly. And even then, that may be optimistic, to be honest, unfortunately.
OK, il dit que, bien sûr, la crise il pense que la crise pourrait durer jusqu'au mois de juillet, donc ça va encore prendre un peu de temps. Et aussi pour réfléchir sur comment est-ce que le secteur où tu travailles peut être affecté ou bien combien de temps ça peut prendre. Il faut d'abord réfléchir sur, après la crise, quels sont les secteurs qui vont d'abord ouvrir premièrement. Aussi, il faut réfléchir sur les secteurs qui ne peuvent pas être comme un conducteur du virus. Et donc, il sait que bien sûr, tous vos business sont vulnérables et il proposerait que vous puissiez réfléchir à peut-être rouvrir vers le mois de septembre. Quelque chose comme ça.
Si on est chanceux.
Si on est chanceux.
Malheureusement. All right, Amir.
Okay, so thank you very much for attending the session. Acha, thank you so much for putting aside time, giving us essential insights into the impact of COVID-19 on African economies. Patrice, thank you very much for translating for the Francophone Fellows. Thank you for Takoza and Tanya and whoever else from the Anzisha team who's coordinated this. I hope that everyone has found this to be helpful and that it can help answer some of the questions that we all have during COVID-19. And if it doesn't, it helps us to be more proactive in the ventures that we run and in the way that we run and possibly redesign or refine our business models. So I want to say thank you very much, and everyone keep healthy and please keep safe during this time.